Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice Podcast. The Heart of Hospice Podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode of the Heart of Hospice Podcast is being sponsored by bkbooks.com. Barbara Carnes and her team at BK Books have created the Approaching Death Support Kit to help educate and support families with clarity and compassion. This new bundle is a practical, ready-to-use resource for the bedside and includes many of Barbara's most trusted booklets. For more information, visit bkbooks.com or see the show notes for the link to bkbooks.com.
Welcome to Season 10 of the Heart of Hospice Podcast. When we started the show back in 2016, I worried that we'd run out of topics and people to talk with about death and end-of-life care. Now, with 580 episodes and over 200 guests, we're still talking about how to get the most out of your hospice care, whether you're an end-of-life worker, hospice professional, family caregiver, or someone with a serious illness. Thank you for joining me to start this next season. I'm thrilled to open Season 10 of the podcast with today's guest, hospice physician and Endwell founder, Shoshana Ungerleider. She's talking with me today about her dad's cancer diagnosis, her experience as a caregiver, and what's happening at the Endwell Conference in 2025. Shoshana Ungerleider is an internal medicine physician, the host of the acclaimed Before We Go and TED Health podcasts, and she's a leading voice in healthcare who regularly appears as a medical expert on CNN, MSNBC, and CBS News. She's been involved with 2 Academy Award-nominated Netflix documentaries on end of life. It's a must-see, by the way. During her training and early years practicing medicine, Shoshana often found herself caring for frail, older patients who were alone, suffering in pain, and surrounded by strangers in a hospital setting. She knew there had to be a better way, a way to make the end of life more dignified and human-centered, so that ending well became a measure of living well. She founded Endwell in 2017 to do just that. In our conversation today, Shoshana talks about her personal caregiving story with her dad. He had a cancer diagnosis, and she talks about how that experience gave her a new perspective on the role of a caregiver. She talks about the different choices and conversations that were made regarding her dad's condition and diagnosis, and some personal choices that she made to reduce her cancer risk based on genetic testing that she had done. She's going to share some of those choices and the details about them in our conversation. The Endwell conferences were started out of a desire that she had to improve the way we talk about and prepare for the end of life. She believes that the Endwell events are making a difference and that there's been a positive shift happening in media and in healthcare. If you're interested in Endwell, the conference that's scheduled for November 20th, 2025, you can go to endwellproject.org to register for either an in-person ticket or a virtual ticket. Today's conversation dives deep into the heart of a caregiver, and it showcases the passion Shoshana has for helping us face our mortality with open minds and open hearts. There's a lot to learn. Shoshana, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. I'm so glad to have you here with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Helen.
You know, I didn't share this with you during sound check, but I have to tell you that it's not just an honor to have you on the show. I have known about your work. I have known about Endwell. I've watched all the videos as they've come out through the years. I know about the movies and the awards, and I'm fangirling just a little bit on you to do this today. So if I trip over myself, you'll know that's exactly why.
Well, that is so sweet of you to say, and I am just delighted that we finally made this work. I have known about this podcast for quite a while, and my team at Endwell are such big fans of you and the show. So I'm just excited to get to chat today.
Awesome. So we're going to be taking a deep dive into all things Endwell to talk about what you guys are doing, what's planned for 2025 coming up later this year, and where you see it going in the future. But I want to start with an icebreaker question. I love to talk about advanced care planning with folks that work in end-of-life care because we often lead by not example.
Yeah.
Yes. And I say that because I'm the poster child for do as I say, not as I do. So I would like to ask you to share something unique about your end-of-life advanced care plan.
Ooh, I don't know that there was anything unique. That's a great one. I recently reviewed it. And gosh, well, maybe something that's unique is that I am rather comfortable in a hospital setting.
Oh.
And so I would say some doctors, have shared with me over the years that they feel similarly that, while I would love to be at home in a comfortable, familiar environment, if I do end up in the hospital and that's where I'm spending my final moments, to me, that's not the end of the world. So I believe that is somewhat unique compared to other folks out there.
Yeah, I think so. But it all comes back to what's your good death? What does your good death look like for you? Yeah, it's a comfortable place.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's a very familiar setting for you. So I can see how that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You just sort of know how things work. You can rely on the care team in a different way than maybe you could rely on loved ones or family members. So for me, it's I wouldn't be upset about that. We'll just put it that way.
I like that. I'm glad you shared that because I do think there's a presumption that someone's good death is at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we do dwell on that quite a bit. End-of-life workers, I think we do. We just assume you're not going to be comfortable in the hospital. But for a lot of folks, that caregiving challenge is even bigger. Your friend Jessica Zitter talks about this all the time. She's a huge caregiving advocate. And that's what we see. We don't just have an end-of-life industry issue. We have a caregiving challenge across the United States. Yeah. So it's not just a single facet to the challenges that we face. So let's start off with a little bit of your personal journey. I know you're a physician, but you had an experience with your dad that you talk about quite a bit on the Before We Go podcast. Will you tell me about your dad and his end-of-life journey?
Yes. Well, we don't even have enough time to talk all about my dad in the next hour, but I will just say, wow, he was one of the liveliest, most curious, loving people I've ever known. We were very close, and I really miss him. He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in the summer of 2022. The same illness my grandmother died of at the same age, his mother. When he died, I immediately knew that I needed to be very involved in his care. So we moved from San Francisco up to Healdsburg, about 20 minutes or so, just north, and spent, I guess it was 8.5 months that he was alive, really there almost every day. And, I had already been at this time, deep in the work of certainly practicing medicine and being a real advocate for end of life. And I thought I was prepared. On paper, I'm like the ideal person to be doing this type of caregiving. But when it's your own family, everything changes. Being a caregiver, even with my medical training, was disorienting at times. Trying to navigate the healthcare system, which I talk about all the time, is a complete mess. Everyone knows that. It is shocking just how problematic it is for people, even with the most ideal scenario and resources. And I also really struggled with knowing when to be the doctor and when to just be a daughter. And my default mode in life, I have learned, is to try to fix things. That is who I am as a person, personally and professionally, right? But I couldn't fix this for him. And it was a really interesting situation to be in, where I had to draw some boundaries for myself, for my own well-being. And, I had to learn what I could do was be there, was hold his hand, was take him to his chemo appointments, ask him what he needed, and try to laugh with him. I think through it all, I really learned how powerful it is to show up, simply show up, not to solve, but to really walk beside someone in their journey and witness it. And it was really, really hard. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, as many people know, is a real bad one. And despite the fact that he was eligible for some newer targeted therapies following his traditional IV chemotherapy, it didn't go well. It didn't go as planned. And we all really, really suffered. There were moments of joy. It came in the small things, getting to sit and watch episodes of Yellowstone together and sharing memories, and seeing my dad get to reconnect with old friends that he lost touch with. Those were the moments that weren't about dying. They were about living, but those were few and far between. And so I really learn just how hard it is to be a caregiver and to lose someone that you really love so much.
Yeah, you find that all the skills that you learned in medical school, all the patients you've ever seen, that it doesn't really bring the value and really what you need to the care of someone you love. That part of it sort of fades away. He had a healthcare team, you know. Yeah. And it wasn't you. You were part of his caregiving team, which is a vastly different role.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on something because of your dad's diagnosis, and I've listened to your podcast. Your dad had trouble with eating. Yeah, that was a huge issue. And that is something that end-of-life family caregivers and patients who are at end-of-life really struggle with, because there's so much culture and emotion and tradition that's involved, and it's a sign of hope and thriving, to be able to eat and maintain weight. How did you guys handle that with your dad?
It was one of the biggest daily struggles. I knew that with pancreatic cancer in particular, appetite, and certainly digestion, given the role of the pancreas in the body, it gets impaired when you have pancreatic cancer. He also got diabetes as a result of the tumor. And so early on, he lost his appetite. And I think it was also tied to his mental health. He was very, very depressed, and existentially really shaken, I should say, by the diagnosis. And, I wish that we would have focused on his nutrition earlier on to give him the strength to get through chemo. Cachexia, which is sort of the wasting of the body that occurs in the setting of advanced cancer, is something that it's very hard to counteract once it takes hold. And it really did with him. And so it was a daily challenge to get enough calories in, to have enough protein. Things that he loved were just not appealing to him anymore. And it is really hard as a loved one to see someone wither away and not find joy in the things that they used to really like to do, eating and drinking and spending time at the table talking. It was just really hard. Closer to the end, when he went on hospice, we really were able to focus on comfort and quality of life, which for him meant not eating, and that was okay. But I think it's really hard to wrap your head around that. And so that was one of the trickiest things. That's why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast, was really, again, to shed light on some of this stuff that we don't talk about enough. And certainly the healthcare system doesn't do a good job of preparing us for when we're caring for people at the end of life.
Yeah, loss of appetite and weight loss, it's so connected into thriving and being healthy. And plus, we're told by the medical establishment, you have to limit your sugar if you're diabetic. You have to limit your salt if you have cardiac disease. And if you don't do these things, here's the way it's going to impact. And then eventually they tell you, you don't need to worry about this anymore.
Right.
It's a complete mindset shift that I think the patients probably get to before the caregivers. And the caregivers want to keep that going. Yeah, there's a lot tied into that. That's why I wanted to touch on that, because there are a lot of different aspects about your experience with your dad, especially with such a severe diagnosis. And he chose to go through the chemo so that he could get to a different form of treatment that was going to be newer and more appropriate. But it was going to be a really, really difficult journey to do it. And he had to make some really hard choices. But I wanted to talk about the eating because that is a big thing. So let's talk about your dad's choices. Were there times as a physician and his daughter that you didn't agree with what your dad chose to do about his health after the cancer diagnosis?
That's a good question. Gosh, I mean, no, in the moment, everything that he chose to do were things that I completely agreed with. Now, having said that, looking back, I think we would have as a family made different decisions had we known how this was all going to play out. And of course, we couldn't have known. But hindsight is 2020. He would have been a perfect candidate for medical aid in dying, which is legal in the state of California. Given the degree of existential dread that he had, this loss of autonomy, he was sort of that CEO type A personality that had he been able to go out on his own terms at a much earlier stage, I think he would have been much happier. And we would have probably gotten to avoid the needless suffering that happened for him at the end of his life. Now we held out hope because he had a genetically mutated tumor related to the BRCA gene. We thought that he would benefit from this targeted therapy called a PARP inhibitor, an oral medicine that you receive after chemotherapy to reduce the tumor burden, and it just didn't work. Or if it did, it worked for a couple of weeks and then he became much sicker. And we really had hope that it would buy him some meaningful time, as it does for many people. It just, it didn't for him. And so that's why we all agreed to pursue more aggressive treatment in the beginning. I think that's the big one. I also wish, actually, as I'm saying this out loud, that he would have been open to, I don't know, alternative modalities to improve his mental health and quality of life during all this. Things like cannabis for appetite, maybe psychedelic assisted therapy, for which, is something people can partake in as part of clinical trials, or if you live in Oregon or Colorado, you can access it legally in those states. I think it would have changed his outlook. That was really quite dark in and around the end of his life, given everything he'd gone through as a young person, seeing his father face cancer, his mother, his older brother rather. And he just carried a lot of baggage around the cancer journey. And as you know, it's a horrible disease. But I think that I would have liked to see him try to kind of lean into that a bit and see where he could kind of come to terms with it in a different way.
Can I ask why there wasn't a consideration for medical aid in dying?
It's a good question. His primary doctor literally brought it up the first day we met with him after the cancer diagnosis, because he thought my dad would consider it, given he'd known him for a long time and, had seen other patients, had helped other patients access medical aid in dying. And
but the doctor brought it up very early on, before your dad had gone into the chemo regimen. And
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he did. Just as I think his doctor wanted to set out a menu of options for the moment and for the future, just to set the stage. And I think we all kind of, again, held out hope that the treatment would work. And it didn't.
So your dad didn't ever later on in the trajectory of his disease say, you know what, let's revisit this idea of medical aid in dying?
He didn't. And we didn't either, though. I think had I brought it up, or my sister brought it up, and thoughtfully considered it at a later time, I think he would have maybe given it a second thought. We just didn't know how things were going to play out,
Well, and if you were really anticipating that the targeted therapy would be successful for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I am loving this conversation, but we're going to take a break right now. There's more to come.
This episode is being sponsored by bkbooks.com. If you're caring for someone at the end of life, whether you're a hospice professional or a family caregiver, you know how important it is to have the right support and information. Barbara Carnes, award-winning end-of-life educator and hospice pioneer, has created a bundle of booklets that's an essential resource for anyone supporting a dying person. The Approaching Death Support Kit from BK Books offers practical guidance and compassionate insights that ease fear and help caregivers know what to expect during the dying process. The bundle includes many of Barbara's most trusted booklets: Gone From My Sight, By Your Side, The 11th Hour, Pain at End of Life, and her newest title, Always Offer, Never Force, and more. All designed to gently guide families through one of life's most sacred and challenging moments. Whether you're a nurse, social worker, chaplain, or end-of-life doula, this kit is a powerful tool to support your work. And if you're a family caregiver, this was made for you too. These resources offer compassionate answers when you need them most. BK Books offers quantity discounts for teams, agencies, and families. So visit bkbooks.com to explore the Approaching Death Support Kit. See the show notes for this episode for a link to bkbooks.com.
So, because your dad carried the BRCA gene,
Mm-hmm.
you and your sister had genetic testing. This is not something that we've talked about on the podcast before, and it's a little bit of an aside, really, chasing a rabbit to a certain extent. But as a caregiver, you made an interesting decision to have genetic testing done and to act on the results of that. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with the testing and what you did?
Sure. So right away, the oncologist tested my dad's the tumor itself, as well as his blood for inherited genetic mutations. It turns out about 10% of all cancers are related to inherited gene mutations that put people the mutations put people at increased risk of cancer throughout their lifetime. His pancreatic cancer was, in fact, related to this. And as I mentioned, my grandmother had died of pancreatic cancer as well. And we're Ashkenazi Jews. 1 in 40 carry a BRCA mutation, which is in contrast to the general public, which is about 1 in 400. And that puts us at increased risk for women of breast and ovarian cancer, certainly pancreatic cancer, melanoma as well. And for men, aggressive prostate cancer. And the good news about getting tested, for which I did and was found to have a BRCA2 mutation, is that there's lots of choices that you get to make if you want to reduce your lifetime risk of cancer. And for me, that meant having risk-reducing surgeries. I knew right away after learning of my mutation that was the right decision for me. There was no question in my mind that surgery was the path forward. For other folks, that is not something that they want to consider. And there are other ways that you can, at least for reducing your risk of breast cancer, monitor for catching it early, actually. Doing mammography and breast MRI. Around ovarian cancer, it's tricky because we really don't have screening tools for it. And so the recommendation around the age of 40 is to have your ovaries and fallopian tubes removed, because ovarian cancer is a very deadly disease and is often caught very late. And so right away, I decided to have a laparoscopic salpingo-oophorectomy, which means laparoscopic removal, minimally invasive removal of my ovaries and fallopian tubes. And then a couple months later, I did a bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction. And so it was a tough time in that I was really in the throes of caregiving. My dad was getting sicker, and I really struggled with whether or not this was the right time to do all of this. But I really, in talking it over with my dad, realized that we both wanted me to be healthy and to avoid getting cancer. And so doing it then was the right thing, although it was really, really hard to prioritize myself and my own health and well-being during this journey, which I think so many caregivers face that struggle of how do you do that? How do you find balance, if even you can use that word? And we know the data show that caregivers face many, many illnesses just by virtue of the fact that they either, aren't getting preventative screenings, aren't taking care of themselves, getting themselves to the doctors. They face early mortality compared to non-caregivers, earlier mortality, I should say. And so it's a big issue among caregivers. And so I'm grateful that I took the time to do that and to heal. I feel well. I am cancer-free at this time, and hope to remain that way. So I'm a big fan of genetic testing and genetic counseling. My genetic counselor was a friend of mine and really was so incredibly helpful in terms of better understanding my risks and coming up with a plan. And, I think that the field of genetics in general in medicine has shifted so much, even since I've trained in the last 10 years. It's something that I urge everybody to look at your family history and consider genetic testing. It's relatively inexpensive. Oftentimes your insurance will cover it. They take the test just through saliva. You can do it at home and mail it back in, and the results are very often actionable. And so I feel like knowledge is power. And I'm grateful every day that I learned about this and was able to change, my fate. And I wrote an article about this in Newsweek, actually, right after my dad got diagnosed, that I think that the one silver lining in this horrible disease is that his diagnosis may have saved my life.
Do you think that your surgeries and your actions, do you think that gave your dad some peace of mind to a certain extent? Because he was aware of all of it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we sat down and talked it all through. Yes, absolutely. It did. He was really supportive of it. I don't think fully understood what I was signing up for necessarily. He wasn't a physician. And so I had to describe what was happening. And, but no, he was absolutely supportive, and always in our family, we've had this, feeling as though, our health is the most important thing, to do whatever you can to preserve it. Nice.
So for my listeners who are interested in taking a deeper dive into Shoshana's experience with the mastectomy and the reconstruction and the genetic testing, she actually has her genetic counselor, her friend, on one of the episodes. It's really very interesting. They talked a lot about HRT and the emotional effects of the surgeries and all that goes with it. So if you're interested, check out the Before We Go podcast, because there's a lot more information there that I found very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about your work, because you guys are doing some amazing things. You are the founder of Endwell. What was the catalyst for starting Endwell, and what's your mission there?
Yeah. Well, honestly, Endwell began with a question that just wouldn't leave me alone. And that was, why are we so bad at talking about the end of life? Early on in my residency training as a brand new physician, I was seeing patients in the hospital who were facing, some of the hardest moments of their lives. They were gravely ill in the ICU, and they weren't getting the information or the support they needed to make choices that aligned with their values. Conversations were happening too late, or more often not at all. And that silence had consequences. People were getting aggressive, invasive treatment that was life prolonging, but also, if you're of older age and have multiple chronic medical conditions in addition to an end stage cancer or organ failure, there's nothing that modern medicine is going to do to cure that. We often prolong suffering, and it's often not what people want, but we just don't give them the option. We don't have those conversations. So in my training, I had the wonderful pleasure of getting to train under some fantastic palliative care physicians and nurses and social workers. And it really changed my outlook on what healing really means, and how I believe physicians should not only be focused on curing disease, but also, walking beside our patients, and bearing witness to the experience. And when cure is not possible, there is space for healing and care. And in 2017, I wanted to create a space where we could reimagine how we live with serious illness, how we face caregiving and grief, and yes, the end of life, And Endwell was sort of born out of that need, really, with this idea that bringing diverse groups of people together from all professions and walks of life to think about how we can come up with solutions to make dying a little less hard for everybody. And at its core, our mission is to make the end of life a part of life, hopefully to transform how we think about and talk about and prepare for the end, not with fear, but with purpose and creativity and humanity. And we put on an annual conference every year. We do work in Hollywood to shift how primetime television portrays end of life and caregiving and grief. And we create community, both in person and in social media and other digital realms, so that we can work together to be part of this movement to transform the end of life experience, to make it something more humane.
The Endwell conference itself is pretty amazing. There are multiple speakers, and you guys have some of the biggest names in Hollywood that have come forward at first by invitation, and then getting in touch with you saying, how can I be involved? How can I get on the stage? How can I support you? Maria Shriver, Tim McGraw, amazing people. So Endwell is getting close to 10 years of educating the community about dying according to who we are and our own values. Do you feel like you guys have moved the needle on these? Look, already she's shaking her head. Oh, no. Do you feel like you guys have made a significant change? Are we getting any better?
The real answer is I don't know. I'm a scientist, right? And so I want data, and I don't know the answer. I don't know that there's anything to point to tell me that is the case. I believe anecdotally that we're making a difference and that things are shifting. I think certainly the pandemic brought death much closer to everybody and showed us that it's never that far away, pandemic or not. And so encourage people to get in touch with their own mortality in different ways. I don't know if that's persisting. I think that, I guess I'm in a bit of a bubble, but if, I had to give you an answer, I do think that that things are shifting for the better, that people are leaning into this. They're more open, they're more curious and willing to talk about things that we used to kind of just whisper about or avoid completely. We've definitely seen incredible growth in storytelling, in media. Shows like The Pit portraying end of life and caregiving discussions, and The Pause in the ER in the way that they do is phenomenal. Certainly the world of death doulas is, exploding, which I love to see. I think medical schools are more and more teaching communication skills and primary, palliative care fundamentals. People want honest conversations, and I think younger generations are much more willing to go there than their parents and grandparents, certainly. But I do think we still have a very long way to go in this country, especially in terms of access and equity. But I am feeling like a shift is happening, and that gives me hope.
That's good. It keeps you going. And we need this conversation to keep happening. I'm still hearing, after 15 years, the same misconceptions, the same myths about hospice and end-of-life care. So, the need to educate is still definitely there.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So, Endwell, 2025, November of 2025, I think.
November 10th. Yep, in Los Angeles.
What do you guys have on the agenda? Can you share any of that with me?
Sure. Let's see here. What can I tell you?
All the secrets.
I want to get it right. So what's unique about this year is I think we're deepening our commitment to storytelling and to impact. This year's theme is radical bravery, and it's all about showing up for each other, even when it's uncomfortable, And I think it's the everyday courage it takes to face things like grief, illness, caregiving, and dying, with open eyes and open hearts. And it's about what happens when we come together to build a more compassionate world, which I think we need now more than ever. And we have an amazing group of speakers. We have Tembi Locke, who's an actor, a writer, and producer and author, as well as JJ Duncan, who's a TV producer and a cancer advocate, and also lost a child to cancer, co-hosting. Dr. Catherine Mannix, who's a palliative care physician from the UK, coming over to speak about her experiences. Dr. Sasha Hamdani, who's a psychiatrist and clinical expert in ADHD, actually. On stage, we have Rebecca Fineglass, who is a policy advisor and somebody who's deep in the grief space, and a lot of other incredible folks that we haven't yet announced, but they're coming. And so I urge folks to head over to the website endwellproject.org to check out either virtual streaming tickets, which are free, or joining us in person in Los Angeles on November 10th. It's really an event like no other. It truly is a wonderful community where everybody is welcome, from all professional backgrounds. And we often hear that people are surprised by how inspiring and energizing a day about end of life can be.
Yeah, I love it. So how can my listeners find Endwell and register and secure their ticket, whether they want to attend in person or virtually?
Just go to endwellproject.org and then hit the homepage, buy tickets, and it's right there for you.
Perfect. And if folks want to connect with you and to listen to your podcast before we go,
Yes.
How can they find you?
Well, you can find Before We Go anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, it's everywhere. You can send me a DM on Instagram at Shoshana MD. And then certainly, more information on my website, ShoshanaUngerleider.com.
An amazing conversation. I love the work that you're doing. I hope to see you at Endwell in person. I would love to be able to be there.
Oh my goodness. I hope you can come.
I would love that. The energy there with all these voices and people who are dedicated to changing, making positive change in the death community. It's really an impressive group of people. So if you have the chance to attend, anybody who's listening, it really is a great one-day event. And if you can't, or if you're a caregiver, if this is not your profession, you're going to learn something. There's going to be a takeaway that you can benefit from registering and attending Endwell 2025 virtually. So take advantage of that. Shoshana, you're amazing. I love the work you're doing. Thank you so much for being with me.
Helen, thank you. This was a lovely conversation, and so nice to get to finally meet you.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.